Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode, our tech focus, which today we are looking at one of the most important categories when it comes to television, which is, of course, cameras and lenses, because without cameras and lenses, I guess there is no television, right? Is that sort of
Sort of like that.
Yeah, we like to think so. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have a great group of panelists. So let's get right into it. First, we have from Grass Valley, Ronny and Geel. Ronny, nice to see you. You are in Amsterdam, I believe, right?
I'm in Breda, the Netherlands, so where the cameras are being designed and built and those kind of things. So,
excellent. Yep. Great, great. And we have, of course, Larry Thorpe from Canon, Thomas Fletcher from Fujifilm, Dan Grainge from Fletcher, and Rob Willox from Sony. So let's get right into it. Obviously, we would have been coming off of NAB this week. And so if we had the NAB show, which I guess there is one virtually in a couple weeks, but, what do you think would have been some of the big buzzing topics among your clients when it comes to cameras and lenses? So Ronny, would you like to start with a quick recap of what would have been the hot topics?
Well, looking at the discussions now, I think a lot of it will be about remote productions. So also, of course, the whole Corona thing in a way made that people also tested what they are capable of. But of course, many things are changing all the time. It's cinema, it's remote productions, it's more efficient, remote workflows, everything. So complete scala of things to discuss.
Gotcha. Larry, from your standpoint, what do you think would have been the big topics? And you've been talking to some of your clients anyway.
Yes, well, of course, the ongoing debate on 4K, which won't stop because people are simply saying, when do we do it? But the hot topic at this NAB, I think, would have been 1080p with high dynamic range and wide color gamut. That seems to be central to the thinking of the American broadcasters, pretty well unanimous. And we did anticipate quite a discussion on that.
Sure. We'll have a little bit of conversation ourselves today. Tom, from the Fujifilm perspective, what do you think would have been your customers would have been buzzing about?
I think the customers are always looking for value, and they're seeing more value from their lenses with the greater communication between the lens and the cameras in today's world. And we'll talk about that later.
Sure, sounds good. And Dan, from your perspective?
Well, as your all manufacturers had NAB happen, we had a huge CapEx budget to present to you at NAB. No, we would have been talking about the same things, HDR and different high-speed looks. On my role at NAP is so much bigger now with different dynamics. So we're talking about building trucks and many different dynamics that I wasn't necessarily in before. But it is remote production. It is working off of internet kind of connections. We were talking about all those types of things, still are. It's just now those are the hot buttons that we touch today, even more so as we come out of this.
Sure. And Rob, from the Sony perspective.
Oh, 1080 HDR definitely is a real hot spot. And after the very large football game in Miami and that experience, there's a lot of people who are very, very interested in that workflow and how that comes to pass. Dan, I'm sorry I missed that huge CapEx. That's always wonderful when you guys give us that phone call. But we were looking also as a manufacturer on how we help people like Dan, and we were looking at the Olympics and all of the gear that needs to be there, and how can we help and share, and then what happens when it all comes back. So we'll wait a year for that to happen this time. But HDR is really a big topic for us.
Right, sure. So obviously we have a few presentations to kind of give people an overview. They will be short, so everyone who kind of gets nervous when you start talking about presentations, they will be quick. So Larry, would you like to kick things off?
Yes, let me just go to share screen. All right, so on the broadcast side, we were going to make quite a bit about the lineup of lenses that we have now. They're all 4K UHD, and as you can see, we have 6 in the box tier, and we have 12 in the portable. At the very bottom right was the new intro at NAB, a lower cost sibling to our 18 by 7.6. We stripped out the range extender, and now you have a 3.7 pound at a lower cost. And we think that rounded out the levels, the cost performance levels. We were also, as we developed those long zoom lens a couple of years ago, we were in parallel working on reflecting a lot of input we had from operators. And we've come out with a new series of focus controller and zoom controller. Thing you notice about them is they both have a display. There's a lot more intelligence inside them, electronic intelligence, and some additional buttons and switches. And what that's all about is to allow the operator to preset different settings. In the display, they will get a representation of the optical range, and in parallel, they'll see the physical range of the knobs, etc. And then they can program them to tailor them to the particular shooting environment. I'll give you 3 fast examples. One is if you're shooting a stage show and you want a beautiful, precise focus on a face. That's done a lot in the HD transmissions of opera. We can give you that with multiple turns. So you have an extreme vernier control of focus, and you can also use that to do rack focusing between entities on the stage. Alternatively, we give you a focus range limit can be programmed where you say, no, I want to go between a couple of entities on a stage or whatever, but I want to do that with a very small movement of the knob. You can program that. And then for sports, you may want a large range of focus change, but again, with a small range of the focus knob, so you can go quickly between these 2 entities here. So that's just a snapshot. On the cinema side, we are introducing our 3rd Cine Servo lens. It sits in the middle there between the 2 that are sort of well known now. And that 20 by, which was a groundbreaking design of 4 years ago, where we really had to totally redesign optomechanics and optics inside to respond to the plea of weight and size and length. And we brought that in at 14.5 pounds, which is quite astonishing. Still nothing like it today. So born of that is this new servo lens that you see there, a 10 by 25 millimeter out to 250 millimeter. And note the 6.7 pounds. Contemporary lenses, Super 35, that are in the 10 zoom or 12 zoom, are everything from 18 to 27 pounds. So this was driven largely by, again, our eye on the sports world, documentary, wildlife, etc. It does have a range extender, 1.5, it'll take you out to 375 millimeters, and you only lose 1 stop. And an interesting quirk, if you will, but a plus, it's like a bonus, as you do switch in that extender, it opens up the full frame coverage from the Super 35. So you, even at T44, you can make very decent pictures of that today. That's it on the new lens. And now we have a new Cine camera. This is a sibling of the C500 Mark II that we brought out just some months ago. And the 2 cameras are identical physically. They have all the convertibility and modularity and connectivity, etc. The only distinguishing features are the 500 Mark II is a full frame 5.9K. The new C300 Mark III is a Super 35 4K. Now here's a quick summary of the relative specifications at a high level. Both will record RAW inside that little box, that singular little box. 5.9K and up to 60p for the 500 Mark II, 4K up to 120 frames per second in the C300 Mark III. If you don't like to record RAW, you have the choice of the XF AVC based on H.264, but again, you get the 4K up to 120 frames per second. If you want longer duration, you can go long GOP XF AVC. If you put a Super 16 lens on that Super 35 camera, it will give you a crop of 2K up to 180 frames per second. And all of those are at 422 10-bit. So quite a new offering. This is a picture of that new lens and that new C300 Mark II of a shoot we were doing for NAB. And just to give you a sense of the size and weight, that it is shoulder mount and very manageable. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Tom, you're up next. You're on deck.
Okay. Fujinon, if we would have been at NAB, we would have been discussing 4K, our advanced focus, ARIA, remote back focus, and a little bit of 8K. I'll kind of go through those quickly here today. Fujinon is happy to have a full range of 15 lenses in our 4K HDR. The 2 new lenses that we would have been talking about at NAB are the 107 AF and the 125. We'll first start with the 125, which is boasts a best-in-class 8mm on the wide end, which is very important to people, ironically, for a long lens. And then the longest zoom ratio at 125. And we'll briefly talk about the improved stabilization from the past. We are giving you a little bit wider, 5% wider and 11% longer in this lens. And then you'll see the f-stop is a 1.7, f1.7, up to 340, and then the lens ramps. And I'm going to show you how we deal with that ramping in today's modern communication with lenses. Let's first look at the angle of view of the 107 compared to the 125. And if you look at the 900 millimeters that you're getting on the 107, this is the tight shot you're going to get across the pitch of a soccer field. And then with the 1000 millimeter, you're getting a little bit tighter, 11% longer, as I mentioned. On the wide end, you're seeing with the 107, we were giving you 8.4. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but you're getting that little bit wider, which is important for baseball, for football, almost all your sports. Of the operator wants the length, but they also want wide. And that's the thing that we wanted to go through. So I was giving you 125 times, but it starts, again, a little bit wider. Stabilization. This is our machine that we have in the factory. We set up a chart across the factory and shot at 900 millimeters, showing the stabilization moving and then turning it on. And you can see how much more stabilized it gets with this. So it's just an improvement on our existing stabilization that's been out there. Remote back focus. This is something that the engineers and the camera operators are going to like. Today, the camera operator has to communicate with the truck to adjust back focus. They certainly can do it on their own, but having a nice monitor in the truck to do back focus is more important, especially as we go into 4K and into 8K. But with the new lenses, most of our lenses have this remote back focus. You can have the engineer be able to control the camera and the lens and back focus it remotely. ARIA, this is something that was developed with Sony, and actually Canon started it, and this was technology in Japan. They shared technology after a period of time. And this is something that we think is really exciting, and as we've been showing people, people are excited. So as the lens ramps, as you zoom in, you can see that exposure, go away. Now, with the ARIA on, the exposure stays constant. So here's the side-by-sider on top and on bottom. When you zoom in on the top, you can see the exposure is lost a little bit, whereas with ARIA on, the exposure stays constant. That is great communication and a real testament to modern technology and communication with the lens and the camera. With our 107 AF, the assisted focus or advanced focus or autofocus, it's the first 4K lens that will do this. This is not something that's new for us. We've been dealing with autofocus and presented it at NAB in 1996. So this is technology that's coming and is going to be a must-have as you get into 8K. It's just really tough the tighter you want to go and the higher resolution. This is something, this is just a quick drawing of the lens, and it's costing you about 1/3 of a stop. And what I would say is if you get a chance, you can take a look at some of our video footage on YouTube. Quickly on 8K, we were going to introduce 2 new lenses here on the right. You can see the 2 new lenses, the 12 by and a 66 by. But we also have PL mount lenses that are 8K, including a 20 by that's a 35 to 700 millimeter lens in PL mount cameras. I think there's a great application for that in concerts as well as in the sports arena. And with 8K, we just wanted to round out our lineup, giving you basically the 4.5 and talking in terms of Super 35 or 2/3 inch, and then the longer end as well. So that's it.
That's for both of you. Obviously, if you go back 7, 8 years ago, some of these features that are designed to help the camera operators do their jobs, they tended to kind of ignore some of those and find them offensive, autofocus and things like that. So what's kind of been going on in terms of their acceptance and what, is it because the 8K and the 4K demands such clarity? What are you sort of hearing from the camera operators to all these features?
I'll offer that 4K certainly places greater demands on maintaining your sharpness. It only takes the tiniest little movement of the focus knob or smallest perturbation, and you'll see blur very quickly in 4K. So we went all out on image stabilization in our new long zoom lenses. And there we had to solve another problem, because image stabilization has not been terrifically popular with camera operators, especially in the United States, because of one artifact. And that is, if you pan and tilt and suddenly stop, the image momentarily drifts. We use different terms for it. I call it drift. And that's something we tackled this time squarely on to eliminate that, not just lower it, but eliminate it. And we've had tremendous response from the folks. We've more than 100 of those long zoom lenses out in the US right now. And the feedback on the ARIA, that control of light that Tom spoke about, and the image stabilization without that artifact, getting kudos on that. We're very pleased about that. Autofocus, our history with it has been mixed. Again, I haven't seen any upsurge in adaptation of it, but maybe it's still early days.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's early days. We've been taking our 107 AF to a few different places, and we've been concentrating on a little bit of the lower end of the market. We took it to Michigan State, to the in-arena vision that student camera operators are operating a camera. They don't have the 20, 30 years of experience you're going to see, you know, in the NFL, you know, NHL, you know, NBA, you know, all the high-end operators here in the States. And they were thrilled by it. And they literally, it was something that the one guy operated the camera the entire game, letting autofocus do all of the work. And he was very happy. He only had one shot the entire night that they felt it wasn't finding focus. But it's going to be an uphill battle. That same game, we had an ESPN crew that was in there, and half of them kind of, yeah, no, I want to be able to control the focus. So I will say this is something that's going to take some time. We're still working on our controllers and refining it and talking to a lot of operators on trying to build the right interface for the technology, because the autofocusing capability of phase detection is fast enough, and it's here.
Right. What do you think in general? And this could be for all of you. You know, obviously there is this new interest in remote REMI, right? At home, home run, where camera operators maybe aren't even, you know, out there, and they're, you know, 500 miles away, or at least a half mile away. Does that change things in terms of these conversations when it comes to things like autofocus at all? Does it become more important if the camera person is more physically removed, or?
So I think in general, you see a trend that, of course, everybody wants to have full control under all conditions, but you see more and more that automation is now about momentarily taking over control, and then from that point, control onwards. And the other thing, of course, with the delay you have in the link, yes, automation will be a big part going forward. So more and more automations and explaining what they do and working with them is something that's increasingly important going forward. So right. I think it helps.
Dan, from your standpoint, obviously specialty cameras are right in the sweet spot there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the biggest issue that we have, you know, you talked about the lag or the delay with the panning, with the stabilization. If the autofocus feature isn't right, people will shy away from it, whether you're remote or whether you're on site. So that has to actually work every time. But when you get better as a cameraman, it's a part of the art. And so you don't want something like that taking over what you're doing. So I can see some pushback at the higher levels. At the lower levels, without a doubt. We've seen people come through with internships, and they still ask for the autofocus feature that they may have had in their college camera. So that I can see, as Tom said, it's just going to take time. But then as they get better, they'll want to turn that off and have some art and some other aspects to it.
Right. Rob, from your standpoint, Sony?
Well, I think there's a very large push to bring fewer people to events. And in this time now, there's a big push to have lower density on the OB. So fewer video operators on track, fewer people traveling to the event. So I think these technologies are going to become very, very, very important. And I saw a demo at a big football game earlier in the year with Dan's gear, and it's incredibly impressive on where that technology is and how that's driven. And Dan, maybe you can tell me how far, you know, in Miami, you were just off the truck, but how far off the truck could you get before you see that system becoming difficult to manage if you had unlimited pipe?
Yeah, we have already, what we're talking about here is a pan bar or any kind of remote production aspect where you control a camera that's in the stadium and the cameraman is outside the stadium. We've been doing that for years with, let's say, a joystick. NASCAR, you've been doing it for years in trucks with pan bars, etc. We are now, not on the public internet, but we are now controlling cameras that are thousands of miles away. We're following golf balls. We're following race cars. So the fastest things that you can imagine, all the way down to, let's take golf, for example. You follow the ball onto the green, and that's very quick, but now they're on the green and they're putting. It's very slow.
Right.
So we're doing the quick and the slow, both dynamics from, again, several thousand miles away. That's a booked path. That is not something that you get just going through your general Wi-Fi. Maybe 5G will, bring a solution to that. But right now, it's a highly booked event that has to be controlled. But we are doing that from the parking lot all the way, again, to multiple states away. And moving forward, we're going to see that continue as the production hub idea takes shape across the country. We in the U.S. shied away from that. Other countries have already implemented that in multiple different areas. But we're going to see that push come, and we are ready for it. Again, it comes down to connectivity, but it's getting better.
That's great. Okay, we have 2 more quick presentations. Ronny, I believe you have a video to show, which is always everybody's favorite presentation. So do you want to roll
Absolutely. A short video of the new LDX100. Because there's so much in it, I will just run the video and then you get a glance. So yeah, that's in a nutshell. So there's a lot to talk about, but yeah, it's a complete new camera designed from scratch, and there's a lot of ingredients in it for today and for the future.
Sure, sure. Okay, Rob. So let's get to your presentation, because obviously then we'll jump into the broader discussion. I think there are some trends there that both your manufacturers kind of hint at. So Rob, when you have a chance.
We introduced 2 new cameras last year, NEB, and I'll get to them in a second. I just want to go through, our design philosophy has been to introduce products as they're required by the market and work very closely with the market. So things like the HDR metadata are all results of interactions with customers, getting feedback, making the beast bigger, wash, rinse, repeat. We've also been very conscious to make things backwards compatible with our last generation cameras. We've got a lot of HTC 2000s out there that are still in use, even HTC 1500s. So when we introduce a new camera, I don't want to make all of Dan's equipment, for example, antiquated. I want to be able to give him IP connectivity from cameras that were never designed for it, or HDR capability from cameras that weren't designed for it. So we always have that in mind. The 3500 and 5500 are configurable for a whole bunch of different operations that hopefully can get into the market, be able to address the new wireless, address the new slow-mo, address the lower cost 4K and things like that. And also, a future forward, let's build a chassis that I can put in IP or put in 8K or things like that. And I'll show you a little bit about that. But the whole thing is to give our customers really good ROI. We're taking HTC 1500s that have been discontinued for 8 years on trade-in now, for example. They're really built quite well and people get their money out of them. So just very, very quickly on a review, we introduced the 3500 18 months ago, built the camera to be HD at this point, support HDR, but move up to a 4K camera, which we introduced as a lower cost 4K to compete in some of the lower end markets and lower rating sports, if you will. Supports 1080p and 120i, which seems to be a very popular format to have every camera run at 2 times. Again, this idea that it works with the 2000 series and the 2000 series will work with this series very seamlessly. So, and the idea that it supports SMPTE, digital triax, and wireless through side panels. It also has single mode fiber and a new HDCE adapter I'll talk about in a minute. And this idea that we can do simultaneous HDR, SDR at 4K when the camera is fully upgraded or at 1080p now. The new flagship camera, the 5500, we just introduced within the past 6 months, and it features what they call an ultra-high bitrate transmission system. So the camera can do 2 times at 4K, 8 times in HD, but it can also send back a second camera signal and supports things like 4K, 4K prompter, and trunk lines and things like that. So it's got a ton of capability, but requires a lot of bandwidth. But it can use the HD features of the 3500 series and work in with that. So when it's not doing duty as a super motion camera, it can play with the 3500. And since the CMOS is identical, they will look identical. So it's a little bit higher utility. And again, this idea that we can provide 4K, HDR, 1080p, SDR, or various mixes of both on the output. So, just a high utility camera system. This was the biggest surprise. That we used to sell a lot of HTC P1s, and they were a close match to the 2000, but not quite. And the camera didn't have quite the utility. So on the fresh piece of paper, we could put the new imager from the 35 and 55 into the P camera and give a truly matching image. And with the use of wireless in golf and wireless in football and in every major sport, it was important to have a camera that could match. So we put this together. And this camera as a standalone also supports up to 6 times HD high frame rate on the 12G. So it's a great utility camera, and again, that idea of an exact match. So without introducing a new camera, we introduced new camera capability for NEB and the fall production system. So this is a set of IP extension adapters. So we had these adapters for single mode fiber and digital triax in the past. So now we've got an adapter that will do 2110. So it allows our 3500 series and our older 2000 series to enter the IP transmission mode. So it's got a redundant interface. And it can also work as a simple and relatively inexpensive CCU. So you could use it as a transmission device, or you could replace an SDI CCU if your plant is fully IP. And it's tiny. It's a 1/3 rack space, 3 rack units high. So it's the same size as our last adapters, but we couldn't make CCU. So this is about half the size of our normal CCU. And the basic complement for this is we want to share remote studios over IP back to a machine room. So if we use the HDCE as a wall adapter or a throwdown box, we get into the IP space, fully 2110, bring that back into a network and work into a machine room. So the idea of doing these remote sports broadcasts can be realized using this device. And again, the idea that we can optimize the amount of camera heads on any given broadcast by the amount of boxes that we want to use. So that's a quick overview of that technology. Another technology that we introduced is actually a really cool idea. Again, this idea of minimizing space on an OB or in a flight pack. We developed an XAVC 4K recorder that fits right into a half rack CCU or a full rack CCU. So the idea here is we've got one set of record times for a half rack CCU and double that in our larger CCU. The record is XAVC 480 or class 300 or L200, and they've been optimized to record 4K HDR. And they all support SR metadata. So I won't put you through the Hugo presentation on HDR, but at our NEB site, Hugo does about a 15-minute overview of SR Live metadata, so you get a really good flavor for what we're trying to do to enable simultaneous HDR, SDR broadcasts. So this works on a 10 gigabit network, so you could use this as a single recorder, or you could have every HDCU recording. So when we're doing large entertainment events, if you want to have a few extra recorders so you've always got somewhere to go in the edit, you could, or in sports, if you just wanted to dedicate a recorder to high 22 or high 24 in Canada, you could do that. And the beauty of it is it's a real-time transfer to a removable storage device if you wanted to have a USB 3.1 drive. And we can network this on a multi-camera basis. So I just have a very simple chart for that. So, get back here, you rotten thing. It's very tricky. Okay, so again, a very simple network control. We've got the same recorder, Dan, that you're using for the HDC 4800s, the PWA RCT1 networked, and a very simple GUI to start, stop, play out some of the information from the HDCU 5000, which can play and record at the same time. So you can have it going to a NAS or have every individual recorder going to USB 3.1. It's pretty cool stuff. And again, this idea of having XAVC as your high end and your and standard codecs for HD. So we can record old MPEG 2422, and we'll have DNX HD, which will be in a version that'll happen later on in the year. We just add an SFP onto the chassis and retask one of the video outputs to feed the NAS. And we have a USB transfer on the front of the unit. So nice and tidy and easy. One of the great things about making camcorders and making studio cameras is you could start looking at matching your camcorder out in the field to get the to be able to do pre-production, and the cameras look exactly the same. The camcorder features a lot of the same operating points as the recorder in the CCU. So you know what you're getting, you know it's going to be the same workflow. It supports SR metadata. So it just, you always know what's going to come into the truck from your camcorder crew. And the SR metadata will allow it through Catalyst to be down converted to HD at a very high quality level and look the same as your SD money program. If I have time, do I have time just to go through this kind of briefly?
20 seconds.
20 seconds. Oh my God. There's nothing at Sony ever happens in 20 seconds. I can tell you that much. So this is just the workflow that we use at a big football game in Miami and a big baseball game in Washington earlier this year. And we've done several experiments with other sports events. So this is our 8K camera system, our UHC 8300. So it's a 3 CMOS 8K 120 frames per second native HDR camera. Outputs S-Log3 and HLG and has 20/20 color space. But the cool thing about this is it's got an 8K output, simultaneous 4K, and simultaneous HD. And we can do cutouts that we can assign from the 8K camera into the 4K into 4K, and the overall 8K cameras can be down converted to HD. So I'll just give you a real quick overview on how we used it. So I can't use the image that we were taking, but you get an idea from here. So we can have 3 virtual cameras on screen at the same time. So this is red, green, and blue. From the 8K, we can send it 4K down to various servers. So I've got 3 different shots, all perfectly synchronized in time. I can also preset in the CCU an area that's between 4K and 8K. And in this case, it's around 6.5K. And it's also output at 4K 120p into a recorder. Then I can take the entire canvas and have a 4K 60p output as a backup recorder, or they can take that in the main feed if they like the camera shot. With a piece of software that we have, we can take a cutout from any of the cameras and have that as a wild record. So I can take from, say in this case, VTR green, just dated myself from server green, put it through a piece of software, extract an area that I'm interested in. I can go beyond the 1080 space. You get a little bit of noise, but I can take it to 1080 with no penalty. Or I could take the recorder that I've got at the 6.5K and also take a 1080p signal out of this. So these would act as 2 times super modes within the by using the 8K. So it's actually a really cool technology. So it's just an example of using 8K in a 2K or a 4K production today, and enjoying those wonderful pictures. And if you want to archive the 8K, it's cool. To me, the 8K is just the absolute apex of imaging technology on a proper monitor. It looks looks just like a window. It's pretty awesome. Well, thank you very much. That's an overview of where we're at this time.
Let's get back to make it Larry and Tom in here as far as, we touched on 8K there, and obviously this zoom function is a big important use within HD broadcasts, but also 4K and so for both of you gentlemen, from a lens standpoint, I mean, what are you seeing as far as this application of like the virtual zoom, if you will, and the impact on lenses? Does it change the way you should choose your lens if you're going to use it for virtual zoom?
Well, if I start off, I'd just say that 8K, we look at it on a worldwide basis. In the Orient, there's a forthcoming 8K service, terrestrial broadcasting. They're already on satellite, so it's real. So we've had to develop products for that marketplace. And last year we introduced a 51 by zoom on the new 1.25-inch format. It was used in China. It was 4 of them used at the rugby international games. And there was to be a couple of dozen used at a very major sporting event this summer that got postponed. But we did bring that lens to the big football match a couple of weeks ago, and did some testing there on the bit that Rob described, extracting replay information from that huge imagery. We brought in our own Super 35mm camera, 8K, with a new Super 35, a developmental lens, a fisheye lens, so we could get a very wide capture of the entire field and stadium if you wished it. And that was something that they were experimenting with. So we're very active in the 8K. The broadcasters here have no interest in it whatsoever other than this niche application of extraction. But the very important point about 8K, the years of R&D that we've been whacking away at 8K in the 2 formats, Super 35 and the smaller 1.25, that technology breakthroughs that we made there spun down into our 2nd generation 4K. And those long zoom lenses that I talked about, they reflected a great deal of the 8K optical breakthroughs. And that's why we've had very, very positive reaction from the marketplace in terms of the optical performance of those 4K lenses. Right. So 8K is real.
But as far as, so for Tom, as far as that zoom function, does it impact if you're going to buy a 4K lens and plan on using a lot for extracting HD, does that impact the type of lens or specs you should be looking at, or are they all pretty good at that?
Well, there's some people that are looking at using 8K with just a set of primes,
Right.
and much how our zoom lenses are used in the cinema world. Our lenses are used on a lot of major motion pictures. They don't zoom with them. They're just setting a focal length.
Right.
So you can still do that extraction, but you now have all the focal lengths and the lenses as opposed to carrying a big box and cases of primes. So that's kind of the approach for the niche market we're talking about here is give yourself a range and you have all those focal lengths in there.
So again, for both of you, as far as this, one of the things I want to talk about was this whole coming together, if you will, of the digital cinema side, which is there's a lot of digital cinema kit that's kind of folding into sports broadcast, which kind of gets to Dan's point about artistic intent and what have you. And what are you seeing as far as that coming together, that merging of the digital cinema tools with the traditional broadcast side?
Well, it's very real. For the last couple of years, we've seen increasing adoption by most of the major sporting outside broadcast folks of large format because they wanted a different look. They wanted a cinematic look for certain. They want to, on some of the extraction, they want to blur the background so they can get that foreground more in focus. So that's where, and they were experimenting with our 8K camera on that also. So this is, it's very real, and it's all good. It's extending the creativity in 1080p production by mobilizing the capabilities of 8K imaging.
Sure. And Tom?
What the cinema lenses, the Cabrio line of lenses, which has been our most successful line of lenses we've introduced, being able to remove the servo and use it as a traditional cinema lens and have the lens accepted by the cinema community is quite a testament. But it really gives the value back to the rental house or the truck vendor that they can work if they have a cinema crew doing a concert and they want to work with cinema controllers, or if they have a broadcast crew coming in and want to be able to control the camera the way they've always controlled it. That's been the biggest asset of that. And then having a range from 14 to 400 or 300 millimeters has been important for people.
Right, gotcha. So Ronny, I wanted to fold you back in here, and obviously this is the big topic, 1080p HDR. All of you mentioned that as far as a lot of interest in 1080p HDR as the production format, the house format, whatever you want to call it. From the Grass Valley perspective, what's your sense on 1080p HDR workflows, where we are in terms of the maturity? Should people be relatively comfortable with 1080p HDR?
I think they're getting more and more comfortable. So what you see is that the last years have been a real learning curve for many people. It's operational, trying, etc. Also, the standards themselves keep moving forward. For us, a big thing has been the creative grading, so people can see the curve and understand what numbers mean, because we keep throwing numbers at the operators. Well, first of all, of course, the freelancers use different brands all the time. So for them to learn the languages of the different manufacturers is quite difficult. In addition, there's so much power nowadays in cameras and so much controls that understanding exactly what to do is quite difficult if you don't really dive into it. Of course, nobody ever reads a user's guide anymore. So 1080p is a big thing for us in HDR. Of course, HLG, PQ, and of course now S-Log 3 as well for more post-production or for the live stuff. So the only thing, of course, what we see is that people who invest in equipment will use 7 years from today still the same equipment in some place in their organization. So we have a high demand on people using everything in UHD or 1080p, but having a path forward in both down converting, archiving, etc., but also knowing for sure the equipments will still be usable 7 or 10 years down the road. And
right.
Yeah, so it's a big thing.
Yeah. So Larry, I mean, obviously you've done some classes recently with some of the big truck companies, OB providers. What is your understanding of the maturity of their, understanding of the 1080p HDR workflows and what it means to the way they are going to purchase equipment and go about their work?
Yeah, well, all of the major broadcasters who are deeply involved in sports have been doing a tremendous amount of work on HDR and wide color gamut over the last 2 years. And we're always in contact with them. They're giving us the latest and making endless suggestions. many of which affect our lenses, but they also affect, we're in the reference display area. And based on primarily the networks here, we got an awful lot of input and pleas from them to put tools into the reference displays to help them do the correct exposures for a hybrid log gamma or a PQ, whatever they're doing. And so now we have a whole toolkit inside our reference displays that we were going to make quite a showing at this NAB. All sorts of, you know, false color with each color slave to specific code levels in the 10-bit, with measurement techniques so you can measure a spot, read the actual nits on a place in the display, putting up the CIE chart so you can see where that is in the color. Just endless tools. So that's a very important part of it. But also in the camera side, we've been sort of learning more on the cinema side, but we see it as these cameras are coming into sports. They're looking more and more at the HDR on large format. And we hear increasingly, yeah, we understand the highlights, but the lowlights are very important to us. And this new camera that I mentioned, the C300 Mark III, I said I had a new image sensor. It's a very unique new Super 35 sensor that we call dual gain output, DGO. And it's a special way where we double read out of the 2 photodiodes inside each photosite at different gains. And then we blend them together and we give you an enhancement up to almost 16.5 stops. So HDR is really stretching these days, but this one, it drives you down. We can take you down further than going up. So deeply shadowed scenes, like when your stadium is in deep darkness, you'll be able to extract great imagery of the crowds and folks in the benches and that. And all of that, I think, is you know, the blending is very real in the cinema side and the broadcast side.
Sure. So Dan, back to on the specialty camera side, if you will. Can I call you specialty camera? Is that okay? Do you get offended by?
Sure.
So, you know, I recall hanging out with you in Pittsburgh at the All-Star game with the super slow-mo, and it was in a tunnel, and it was the biggest thing ever. Big Poppy was all impressed with it. All the players loved it. Where do we stand as far as, you know, frame rates and where that's all headed? Because that's obviously a big part of the sports productions as well.
Yeah, over the years, we found that more frames isn't necessarily better. So we've really kind of settled in between 300 and 500 frames a second. There are some specialty uses for golf that can go all the way up to 6,000 frames. We had an interesting situation where we married cinema lenses with a very high-speed camera at the large football game we were talking about. The dynamic there was very interesting because he needed to pull focus in a way that was more sports oriented. And there is such a dynamic with these lenses that causes you to turn it multiple times to get the focus, where in sports, we want it right now. So we had to get him a specialized wheel that allowed him to turn it very quickly for the sports applications for far and near, where in a film application, that's not what they want. So we have had these dynamics kind of cross over for several years now. The 4800 has been a camera we've used at 900 frames all the way down, you know, to 300-esque in 4K. We've done zoom extraction with those for years on Monday night and Sunday night football, using both the Canon Cine lens on Sunday night and then the Fuji Cine lens on Monday night. So they have all served their purposes very well across the board. So that's kind of the general area we're in. We're now going to smaller cameras, the Atom 1, the Pico camera. So the 4800 handheld size, we're now looking to put them in smaller and smaller places with those. And they're in that 300 frame capacity, 500 at the maximum. They're all doing HDR. They're all doing 4K if you want it. So we generally are outside of that realm, though, with most of what we're still doing. I can speak also to HDR. Rob referenced a 15-minute demonstration by Hugo. I sat in on a 2.5-hour demonstration by Hugo, so about 15 minutes. The point there is that it is difficult. We've been doing it at NEP for a couple of years now, specifically with Notre Dame. And it is more about getting it in front of more people, more engineers. It is that difficult to do both shows, both the HDR and the standard show, as we call it today. So again, lots of different areas that we touch.
Yeah, that's the big thing. It really is trying to get the SDR show and the HDR show out of the same camera, at the same time, with the same craftspeople, with a blend of equipment, and use things that are already on the truck. And are some of the other branded recorders good enough to record the signal, or do they need to step up their game, go from 8-bit MPEG up to 10-bit XAVC, for example, to be able to satisfy those needs? I think there's an expectation by the viewer now to have high frame rate on every single replay, whether it's 2 times, 4 times, 6 times, 8 times, 16 times. They all want to see it, and I think volumetric is going to be the next thing on. Okay, we showed you all this very slowly. Now we're going to try to show you from another unique angle. So I think it's really enhanced the viewer engagement. But it's repetition of events with HDR that really are going to do it. The first bigger event that we took on was Rio. So within the past 4 years, we've been doing either 4K or 1080-60p and long seasons of college football and golf remotes and everything else. And every time we do one of these things, we do a lot. The great thing is we must be doing okay because we get invited back, which is a good thing. But having the tools like the 3500, 5500, and especially the HTC P50 has been really enabling technology.
So since you mentioned that event that's been postponed until next year, they were going to go all in with their chips on 4K, HDR, and IP, right? So obviously that's not happening this year. How much easier do you think those things will be next summer? I mean, you mentioned that obviously we don't have events for a little bit to test these things, but will it be easier, those 3 things? Because it seems to me they may actually potentially benefit as far as the workflows and trying to bite off all that stuff at one time.
Well, I really hope we're back to doing sports to be able to do this experimentation, as soon as possible. And I really feel for the crews, especially, who are watching what they've done on TV last year, and unfortunately not getting compensated for this year. But the more experimentation and the more feedback we get results in better software. One of the things that we did do, as Larry mentioned, the monitoring and the tools of the monitors are really, really important. And we introduced a 24 and an 18 that are around 1/3 of the price of the mastering monitors that we had out previously. So more people on the same truck can see the HDR image, which I think is really important. So those tools, I think, will be available. And we may get some consensus on workflow, because there's a bunch of different flavors out there that people are promoting.
Sure. So Tom, closing comments, you're going to kick us off. So your closing comments to the industry. You're still on mute, so just be sure to unmute.
There you go.
Sorry, put you on the spot.
It's an exciting time for us, whether it's in the digital cinema world or in the broadcast, of trying to fill the needs of what the market wants, building lenses that don't have breathing. If you're a cinema person, dealing with the ramping, the lens communication is exciting. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this develops in the next few years.
Gotcha. Ronny, Grass Valley?
So I think that many of our customers have a list of things they want to achieve the coming 7 to 10 years. And I think all the things we discussed and many more, including sustainability, are on that list. So I think everybody is now rethinking their total operation. And I think they need all the flexibility they can get to enable them to check all the boxes and also reinvent their own company. So it's part of the ingredients we spoke about, and I think some more.
Excellent. Dan, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say that we at NAP are partners with all of these manufacturers, and without their new products coming out, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Further than the training and all of the other things that go along with it are a big part of the support that we get from everybody here. And so that really helps us to expose it and move it forward, to be able to implement these new tools as we move along, because as we come out of this, the at-home production, the ways of doing business are going to be different. And I know that we're ready for that. We've been doing it in kind of a small capability in the US, and now that's going to continue to grow. So we're ready to move forward.
Great, great. Rob?
I'm really encouraged that there's a lot of inter-manufacturing sharing of information and ensuring that our customers are getting one standard. I think we all learned from the 5 or 6 different IP standards that were out there and people were building to and investing to. It was great to see that harmonize on ST2110. So all of us can move forward in terms of enabling REMI and some of the other things that we had talked about today. So the training is a big part, and you know, Dan, you guys can teach us an awful lot about our own cameras because you use them every day. You know, your golf remote is the busiest remote out there, and those guys are doing HDR and all those viewer enhancements every day. So I'd like to sit down and have you guys teach us on our own cameras. And I know that we're working on a course right now for a lot of the truck owners to be able to realize getting the most out of them, but you guys use these tools way more than we do, and so it's got to go both ways.
Larry, the final word to you, sir.
Well, it's been a mad gallop for the last 3 years in getting that 18 4K UHD lenses ready for the broadcast industry. And what I'm very encouraged by is that largely the customers get it, that if they get a 4K lens, they get better HD, and they get much better 1080p, more vertical resolution in the 1080p. And they seem to understand that. And they also seem to be accepting that the HDR, which came with the new generation of 4K lenses, also transfers down, that the lens is the first footprint on HDR and wide color gamut. So that's encouraging.
Excellent, great. I just want to say, again, thank you to all of you guys for the support of SVG. Obviously, I've done panels with Larry at NAB, and every time, I know all of you have done panels with. I'm always amazed at where the technology you guys have brought things. I mean, it's just amazing, the capabilities that are at the fingertips of the sports production professionals. And, you know, I think it's all filtered down to the phones. So even though we're all now on our phones on TV, it's making a difference. So it's really, you know, impressive. And thank you so much for all your time today, obviously, and hope to see you all soon somewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ken.
See you
Thank
soon.
you all.
Take care.